So how do you integrate pranayama and meditation in your teaching? Guys, these are such important pillars of the yoga practice. So how do we get them in there? How do we sneak them into an hour-long class? Well, in this video, we're going to talk about just some of my tips and hints for how you can do this effectively. First of all, let's just back up a second and say, should we include pranayama and meditation in your teaching? Is it important? Should we? Well, really the answer comes down to you and your teaching style. There are some teachers who thrive on meditation and pranayama. It's totally their jam. In fact, maybe they only teach that. And then there are some teachers who are real asana folks who just love the practice, and shavasana is enough of a meditation for them. We want to be clear about the intention and what is the class experience that you're trying to create. Obviously, if you're creating like a real kick-ass, let's play Sia and Guns N' Roses and rock it out, then maybe that's not a class where you might include those things. First of all, think about what your intention for the practice is. My opinion, or just my 2 cents, is that these are such amazing practices for the nervous system, for cultivating mindfulness, and for really explicitly directing students' attention to the heart of the yoga practice, which is awareness, and not only the ability to generate a sense of my own consciousness, but also a capacity to control how I direct my awareness, whether that's focusing on the breath or ultimately bringing it into a meditative practice, which can serve us off the mat and in our lives through recognizing our thoughts and conditioning and being able to cultivate a better way of being with our minds. So for me, I'd say these practices are just like, they're just too good to pass up, everybody. So if we can bring them into our class space, I would say, yes, let's, even if it's really, really brief. It's amazing how a little bit can go a long way. So let's talk a little bit about the practicalities of timing. These days, many of us are teaching like an hour-long class or even a 45-minute class. It's really hard to get everything in there. It's hard to teach an asana practice in an hour. So if you've got 75 minutes, 90 minutes, woo, yay, like all the stops. You can pull out all the stops with that one and really do a longer pranayama or meditation. But for us who are teaching, let's just say an hour class, yes, we can sneak it in there, but generally, unless you're teaching a specific pranayama meditation style, it's not going to be more than 5 to 7 minutes of the class, okay? Because students, they don't know how good pranayama is for them yet, folks. So they're coming expecting an asana practice for the most part. We need to deliver on that promise and give them that, and then we can sneak in some of these subtle body practices, which are so powerful and so good for people's mental state and their nervous system and their stress. So, but we got to kind of sneak it in there. So just as a general rule, I'd say 5 to 7 minutes to aim for that. So now the question becomes, where in class do we put it and how do we sneak it in there? Well, there are a few different ways you can do it, and it's going to kind of depend on the time of day of your class. Because think about it. If you're coming in to teach in a space at 6 a.m. in the morning, that's got a very different feel to it than teaching at 6 p.m. at night. 6 a.m. in the morning, lights are dim, people are still sleepy, they're kind of like still daydreamy. You could bring in some pranayama, and that's going to probably match where their nervous systems are at the beginning of class. You know, it would be okay to bring that in there. And then you kind of get them going, so finally they're ready to go off into their day after a little bit more activity, right? A 6 p.m. class, people are coming out of their days, they're coming from work, they've had their heads full of things, they need to get their yayas out. People often don't have the capacity to sit still at the beginning of a yoga practice. That's one of the reasons we have asana, so we can get everything sorted out so that we can sit and be with our minds. So if you're teaching anything but an early morning class, my personal preference, unless it's an activating kind of breath or kriya, is to do the pranayama and or meditation at the end of practice. And people do this in lots of different ways. Some people do it after shavasana. I tend to do it before shavasana just because the students in my kind of yoga culture have been trained that shavasana is it. we don't do something after Shavasana. So if I get them up and sit and have them do more stuff, it's going to be very confusing. So what I tend to do is I do the cool down, etc. And then I don't have them lay down. This is kind of a little trick, but I'll do my cooling poses seated. So like seated poses, seated twist, rather than reclined. Once those puppies lay down, it's very hard to get them up, right? So I keep them doing seated poses for the cool down section of class. And then before Shavasana, have everybody sit. And it could be pranayama, it could be meditation, it could be a little combo of both, as long as, again, it's not too crazy long. If you can get both in there, great. But have them sit, get props, etc., and a little practice. If I'm doing both pranayama and meditation, pranayama first. Pranayama helps lead in and prepare for meditation. And so maybe it's just something super simple, like, an inhale count to 4, exhale count to 4. And then eventually we drop that and just focus on being. Or maybe it's a visualization, or maybe you have other meditations or practices that you like to do. And then here's kind of a nice little option. If I'm teaching it at the end, before Shavasana, then I can say to folks, hey, if you want to stay in meditation, stay in meditation. If you want to lay in Shavasana, come on into Shavasana. That way, people who are like really keen on the meditation aspect of the practice, or who just feel like, hey, what's this? I kind of want to hang out here longer, can do that. Now, are we ruining their yoga practice if we don't do Shavasana? Okay, Shavasana, just a little side note, is great. Shavasana is wonderful. It's an integration pose. It's where we lay down so our postural muscles can finally relax. This is really great for us, right? But sitting a little longer in meditation is pretty great too. So you don't get the relaxation of your postural muscles if you stay seated in meditation. But part of what Shavasana does is lead us into that kind of meditative, decompressed state. So frankly, I think it's fair game. If people are loving the meditation, I want them to be able to sit and do it a little bit longer. And in an hour-long class, you kind of have to choose. I could have everybody come down in Shavasana and not stay in meditation, but then I'm shortening the meditation. So if I had 75 minutes, we would do both. We could do the pranayama meditation, and then I would have everybody lie down, best of both worlds. In an hour-long class, I tend to give the students the autonomy to choose what they would like to do. Now, that isn't to say that you can't do pranayama at the beginning of class. In fact, one of the most common things we do at the beginning of the class is invite students to do Ujjayi, which is a form of pranayama woven into the asana practice. So that's a clear winner of introducing pranayama at the beginning. But because students tend to come with such high mind energy, I usually want to get them into movement pretty quickly, with the exception of Ujjayi, and then lay in the pranayama or meditation practice after. So I hope this has been helpful for you. I love pranayama and meditation. And remember, you guys, just a little goes a long way. And this might be the first time in their lives that your students have dabbled in mindfulness or meditation. So make it really accessible. Final tip, make it super accessible. Keep it super clear. Don't use fancy words. Make it something that they feel empowered to do. And final tip for you, also, when you finish the practice, I highly recommend, whether it's pranayama or meditation, that you invite students to reflect on how they feel, okay? Because what tends to happen is you do the practice, it's over, and there's no reflection period. So students just go from changing their state to running off into their day. But if you, as the teacher, take that extra moment to say, feel, what has changed in your body? They start to get the idea that this pranayama and meditation stuff could really help them manage their stressful lives off the mat. And this is great, right? So we want to inspire them to become self-aware and to also notice the power that these practices can have to help them transition and manage their own state and to self-regulate off the mat. So there, I hope you've enjoyed it. If you have any tips or tricks or things you would like to share, please put it in the comments below. As always, subscribe for more tips, and I will see you on the mat.